Henninger, who has taken over for him, and now they're here together, and so it's bizarre mixing of worlds. If I can just sort of give my thoughts as a framing tool, right? So when we think about the circular economy, just like net zero, I can't remember where she is, but like we've got very different definitions here, right? We have, let's reuse some monitors, let's recycle some stuff that's on a plane, and let's put some waste materials into cement, right? And all of those are really part of the circular economy, but I think it'd be really good to get our two new panelists' thoughts on those talks and what you felt when watching this presentation. So Claudia, do you mind going first?
No, it's absolutely fine. This is not quite my background, so a very different industry, but I'm happy to see that I'm not alone in a very polluting industry to work in there and trying to make it better. I thought it was super fascinating to also see not only that net zero is very differently defined, but it's also kind of like looking at sustainability and what it actually means and how it's being looked at. From listening to all three presentations, I felt that there's probably a challenge with infrastructure, not only to scale it up, but also to actually make sure that things are not thrown back in together and/or to see how different people can work together from the infrastructure and actually make it circular. But one of the biggest issues, probably also looking from an industry perspective, might be the cost-benefit ratio, which doesn't seem to be quite there, like the environmental benefits and everything else is there, but because the cost benefits isn't, that's probably dragging it slightly down. So, but having said that, I think it's quite nice to also see that there are solutions and there's relatively easy solutions that could be done as well, especially with the aviation waste. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe common sense that we should recycle a little bit more. Maybe putting it out there too much. It's the same thing with e-waste. Like, why always buy meat? You can actually get something that is exactly the same or a similar quality. And then with the cement, has been actually quite fascinating to see that there are alternatives, but obviously it's too young maybe at the moment to also like see what are the kind of like implications later on.
Yeah, from my perspective, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Congratulations to all the presenters. I think the presentations were amazing. Regarding what you were mentioning, Mike, how to define circular economy, that's part of the problem. No? There has been this very famous article that collected more than 140 different definitions of circular economy, and the authors, that was like 5 or 6 years ago, they have done a new one now, and it's more than 200 different definitions of circular economy. So definitely, that's something that we have to tackle, no? And to see what circular economy really means. I don't have the answer at the moment. One of the things that beyond what Claudia just mentioned regarding cost and infrastructure, I think policies is very important. No, I think that in the case of Royce, you know, I want to know your opinion, but from outside, it seems that are we just stupid? Because, you know, it's just we are relying in an outdated policy, and it's as simple as you, and I don't know if there is other aspects there, you know, that you didn't mention during the presentation, but from outside, it seems like something that is a huge problem and have a very easy solution, you know, if we change policies. And also related with what Nico was mentioning during his presentation, you know. So, what should we do with the informal sector? No, that's something that maybe you want to expand a little bit. But you know, should we integrate them or not? You know, so that's something really interesting. You know, and yeah, regarding cement is a huge industry. You know, and I agree with you. The problem is that there is, in the global south, we have to still do a lot of infrastructure, you know, and we need more cement, you know, and it's not something difficult it's not something easy to recycle, you know, so I think we have to go in that direction that you are doing, you know, that using new materials to try to reduce that carbon footprint, which in the case of the clinker, I agree, is the materials, but also is the energy. So maybe we have to start to also not only focus on the materials, but also to start to find renewable sources that can reach those temperatures, beyond using waste. Okay, that's one option, but why not start to look for solar energy that can reach those temperatures instead of using fossil fuels.
So I guess a chance for our speakers to respond to that. I think we can do away with the mic problem, unless people look back and complain.
Yeah.
Do you guys want mic? No. Okay. So response.
Yeah. I don't know if those were questions, but I note here. I took some notes regarding the cost benefits approach that you mentioned. I think is what we have, right? But I think what is happening in Global South mostly is that there are some market imbalance or like flaws, I'm gonna tell you something that this is something that I discussed with some people doing research on waste management in South America, and they say that in all the countries in South America, the price per ton of waste going to the landfill is too little. So when you have those kind of standards for this easy solution, it's so cheap that kind of like marks or that kind of like affects the whole market. So I think, we should kind of restructure that to try to find what is the true price of things, And I think life cycle assessment has, that's like the spirit of that. So maybe at some point we should try to impose that as well, like to think of some kind of taxation, right? That was my note.
Yeah, so I mean, touching on the kind of infrastructure that you mentioned, Claudia, so I already mentioned that on the plane, you can segregate waste, but on arrival, if the infrastructure isn't there, it's not being recycled. And there's kind of even a further note on that in the presentation. I said that something like 25% of it is recyclable plastic. But that doesn't mean that in the UK necessarily there is the infrastructure to recycle it. Quite a large proportion of the plastic is in theory recyclable, but the cost benefit isn't there. It's very expensive, or the residual plastics aren't high enough quality. So that's definitely something that would need to be improved to kind of see these real benefits. And a note on policy / are we stupid? The policy one is an interesting one because, as I mentioned, when we were in the EU and we could treat all of this EU waste as domestic, there's no evidence that was actually being done. In fact, there's evidence that even domestic waste is being treated as high risk at a lot of airports, because the risk of cross-contamination, if you segregate things, is there, and they've said they don't want to risk that, so they aren't trying. And so even if policy changed and we said this waste is low risk, does that mean that it would translate into real reductions or real improvements to recycling? Not necessarily. So maybe more than like a permission to do something, it would need to be more of an incentive, or like, we need you to do this, coming at it from a different direction.
Thank you. It's my turn. And responsible for the first question in terms of the cost ratio, yes, actually, for a lot of cement manufacturers, they don't like to produce this kind of low carbon cement because of the high cost. A lot of things, the first thing they consider is profit. This is definitely right. And the second is the strength, the performance of their product. Both properties are very important. These two properties for this part, this material can't meet the requirement, no. But I believe in future, if we in detail develop this material, once it's become cheaper and the strength, the performance becomes better, I believe a lot of cement manufacturer is willing to produce this kind of cement. And in terms of the second question about should we develop the solar cell, the solar energy, should focus on more. So solar energy rather than recycling stuff. Yes, we can start. I think we can start from all spectrum. This is just one aspect because recycling is a big part. We cannot ignore a lot of waste, a lot of industrial byproducts. They are treasure. I mean, not a real treasure, but they are useful. If we fully utilize them and combine with the solar cell development, solar energy development, I think we can easier towards the sustainable future.
You used our platform name. So if I perhaps contextualize a little bit, so actually there's research going on here at Manchester switching to hydrogen as an energy feedstock, right? As you can sustainably make hydrogen. Alex, I'm sure, is already doing the LCA on it in his head. But what's really interesting about this is something that Nico brought up in his presentation, which is, well, is the circular solution always the most sustainable, right? And so for some of those things, maybe we need to switch an energy source. For some of those things, maybe we need to stop people from flying. And for some of those, we need to switch to vegan foods to be able to make people feel better about flying. How do you, as a panel, think we can contextualize those different potential solutions against each other for a sustainable future? Alex, good.
I think the first thing that we have to think that is just being circular per se doesn't have any sense. You know, I think becoming circular makes sense if we are making things more sustainable. You know, so that's the first thing that I want to make clear. You know, being circular per being circular. No, we want to be circular because we want to be more sustainable. And if it's something is circular but less sustainable, doesn't make sense. You know. And in this case, obviously, you know, like, it's complicated. What we have to do is to start to quantify all these measures and see, you know, really, obviously, this is taking it to my word, no? But I think life cycle assessment, and it's a great tool for doing that, you know, and I look for unintended consequences. I think it's very important, climate change, and that's what we are here talking about, and it has a very important component, which is the urgency. In the case of climate change, we don't have much time left, but I think we will be killing ourselves if we don't look for other environmental impacts, you know, because I don't think that nobody wants to reduce climate change at the expenses of creating other impacts. So I think, I know it's complex, it's difficult, you know, but we have to have that holistic version or vision, you know, and that goes beyond that. Also social aspects, as Nico has touched as well, you know, and obviously economic aspects, because again, we cannot kid ourselves, you know, by thinking that things are just going to be done if they are terribly expensive. You know, so.
I mean, maybe your comment on the unintended consequences. So one of the questions I got last time I gave the presentation was, what happens if we move to like reusable tableware on the flights? So you're not disposing of things at the end, you can reuse it. And someone actually did a really interesting study in Spain looking at that and found that the impact of carrying like a higher weight, so when you move to reusable tableware, actually caused an increase in fuel burn, which meant that more emissions were made from the actual flight itself rather than would have been if they just stuck with the disposable, which I thought was really interesting. And like you say, it touches on the point of circular doesn't always mean most environmentally friendly.
I would like to, I mean, you asked me what should we do with informal recycling. That's something that I would like to say in 10 seconds. I think for e-waste, they should be integrated because they are dealing with hazardous materials. For other materials, I think it can be a little bit more flexible. You can stay informal, but with informal recyclers, and e-waste, you have to formalize them anyway. And regarding these different measures that you are mentioning, Mike, I think For me, the solution is way simpler. We have to go to upstream solution, try to affect the means of production and the way in which the products are designed. I think we're putting too much pressure on people's behavior and trends of consumption. I think even though we're trying to do our best, there are things that they should not exist, like plastic bottles is something at this point, if we really think that the climate crisis is an issue, we should stop doing that like immediately. And I think that's a very kind of like a straightforward solution, and I can tell you 1,000 more, but I think we're affecting the profit, and that's something that I think should be very sensitive.
So Branwen, I think you had a question. Do you want to ask that now?
Yeah, I was going to ask about the alkali binders. Just how confident are you that those binders, instead of the clinker, have an actual environmental saving? Just because of like past LCAs and stuff, the industrial production of a lot of chemicals obviously uses natural gas and fossil fuels and the transportation, and sometimes they can't change the impacts of like conventional clinkers. I was wondering, how confident are you that it's going to decarbonise, and like what the numbers look like?
Sorry, could you say again?
No, here, I can repeat.
Yeah.
So the question was about the confidence of the numbers of the alkali substituents over the clinker.
Yeah.
Like, are those genuinely more sustainable? Because obviously lots of major chemical companies like to present data on their chemical processes, which is not necessarily authentic. So have you looked at those numbers in terms of the sensitivity of them?
No, but I would say this kind of material is in developing. It is still cannot be practical using to know. So a lot of value, a lot of performance, a lot of sensitivity are in evaluation. So, but I'm confident that we're developing a more sustainable, more environment-friendly cement by using our new activator. As I mentioned, previously for alkaline activate binder, only two, sodium silicate and sodium hydroxide are the main binder, main activator. But with the development of the near neutron salt, like sodium carbonate and sodium sulfate activate binder, a lot of issues existing in the alkaline activate binder can be overcome. Yeah.
And so the second half of Branwen's question was really about the transition from using natural gas or fossil feedstocks in production to the electrification of manufacture. And so I'll ask, because we're nearly out of time, but I'll ask everybody here to think about this. So how do your numbers change when you think about the electrification of whatever that process is? So that might be the electrification of the production of fuels for airlines. Again, I think they should just get shut down. Yeah. I'm very far from home, and I do love my parents. It's not that I don't want to see them. But like, how would electrification change the numbers on your cement production, if you can make that entirely from electricity?
I don't know the number, sorry. It's hard to say. But maybe from previous research, it can count off the over 50 electronic consuming.
Yeah. I mean, I have been working with cement, and the problem is one of these industry processes that is very difficult to decarbonize at the moment, because nowadays with renewable, with electricity, it's very, very difficult to reach those temperatures of 1,400 degrees. You know, so we have to keep using natural gas. Or petrol.
Well, yeah, but this would be electrolysis to make hydrogen and burn hydrogen to do it. And I think it's those extra processes where there's a cost to those extra processes. Is that better or worse? I think is going to be a key transition.
I know there is a new solution, an alternative solution developed by Cambridge University to replace the oven to calcining the limestone and the clay. Instead of calcination, they use electronic directly to produce the calcium oxide. Electronic power to use some chemical reaction, decompose the calcium carbonate directly to the calcium oxide.
And I think that's the challenge. In the morning, we heard a lot about the risks of taking these technological solutions and not integrating them in. And I think for all of those innovations, we really have to be careful that we both push forward with the development of new things, but properly contextualize it, get some numbers to back that up to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences and we're pushing forward on things that are genuinely sustainable. So with that, please join me in thanking all of our speakers.